It is a cold midwinter day in the first month of 1184, and in the eastern town of Kamakura, an imperial envoy has arrived at the residence of the Genji leader Yoritomo. Yoritomo meets the imperial party in his reception, accompanied by his wife, Hojo Masako, and his younger half-brother Yoshitsune, also known as Kuro. The imperial envoy, Nakahara no Yasusada, is flanked by his retainers and attendants. Despite the finery of their clothes, the imperial entourage appears bedraggled and exhausted, for they have just completed a grueling 300-mile journey from the nation's capital. Please, make yourself comfortable, Yoritomo orders refreshments to be served for his visitors, who gratefully down their cups. Then the envoy looks up. I come on behalf of the retired Emperor Go-Shirakawa, and I have been sent to bring you my report of what has happened in the capital in recent days. The envoy coughs, catches his breath, and continues. A terrible event has happened. An outrage that we have not seen in the capital for many years. The Emperor has been attacked. Please, urges Yoritomo quietly, tell us what happened. They came without warning. Kiso's men, Kiso Yoshinaka, the so-called Asahi Shogun. Well, by now the retired emperor regrets ever awarding him that title. There were thousands of them outside the palace gates at Hojuji, bellowing and laughing, taunting us. At first it was just words, but then Kiso ordered his archers to fire arrows. We tried to protest. The Tsuzumi lieutenant stood on the palace walls and shouted at the rabble to stop, but then they started shooting flaming arrows. Part of the palace caught fire, and soon the fires spread uncontrollably. We couldn't believe it. We never dared to think he would set aflame an imperial residence. We were defended by warriors of the Setsu Genji, but they came under attack from Kiso's men, and as they retreated to the west, they were attacked by men waiting for them, perched behind shields on rooftops, ready with stones and boulders. The Genji fell with smashed skulls and broken backs as the boulders rained down on them. Our main defenders had been taken out in minutes. We had the warrior monks of Mount Hiei too, but they were overwhelmed by Kiso's men. Some fought, others escaped up the Kamo River and into the eastern mountains, but we were left defenseless. Then Kiso's rabble saw that Lord Yorisuke, the governor of Bungo, was at the riverbank too. They cried out, "Oh, it's Bungo the Big Nose!" and they stripped him naked and left him standing there in the freezing cold. The envoy pauses his story and, with a shaking hand, asks for more tea. He downs his drink, and then Yoritomo asks, "What about the retired emperor?" Yes, the retired emperor, Go-Shirakawa, was able to board a palanquin and was carried away, but he was showered with arrows too. Eventually, they were able to reach Gojo Palace, where he found refuge. But his grandson, the soon-to-be appointed infant emperor, was separated. He was taken onto a boat, and his attendants sailed out into the Garden Lake, but they too were hit by volleys of arrows. Can you believe it? The boy is just 4 years old. The gods were kind though, as he was able to reach Kanyin Mansion. As far as I know, he is still alive. The next morning, we learned that along the riverbank, Kiso had put on public display the heads of all the men he had taken, hung in rows along the Kamo River. More than 630 men were decapitated. At this point, the messenger breaks down and begins weeping. Yoritomo exchanges glances with his wife and brother and waits for the envoy to regain his composure. And that is not all. There are rumors in the city that Kiso Yoshinaka now has dreams of being emperor himself. He has also written to Taira no Munemori and offered a truce to the Heike. He has told them that if they come back to the capital, he will unite with the Heike, and together they will attack east. His target is here, Kamakura. Yoritomo's brother, Yoshitsune, gasps, unable to disguise his shock. And Lord Yoritomo, the envoy says, as he removes a bag that is hung around his neck. He takes out a folded parchment. This is what I have brought, at great risk I may add, on behalf of the retired emperor. He unrolls the document and hands it to Yoritomo, who reads it in silence. Yoritomo then looks up and bows his head to the envoy, who says, "The retired Emperor Go-Shirakawa appoints you, Lord Yoritomo, as Supreme Commander and Protector of the realm. He calls upon you to save us, Shogun, The envoy and his entourage have now been escorted to their quarters, leaving just Masako and Yoshitsune with Yoritomo as they digest the momentous news. Yoshitsune is pacing up and down. "Our cousin has gone mad, Yoritomo. The power's gone to his head. To challenge Go Shirakawa is one thing, but to burn down his palace and to offer a truce to the Heike? But this is an opportunity now," says Masako, and her husband nods. "Remember the dream that Morinaga had on Izusan all those years ago? That you would become shogun? It's finally becoming true." "So, will you accept the retired emperor's request?" asks Yoshitsune. "Yes," says Yoritomo. "But do you trust him?" "No, of course not. Go Shirakawa is like a spider in the center of a web," says Yoritomo. "And anyone who comes close to him doesn't last very long. He will do anything to retain his own power. He may claim that the infant he has appointed as his puppet is the real emperor, but we all know it's the old man who pulls the strings in the capital. But at this moment, he needs me, and I need him. Yes, we need his endorsement," says Masako. "Yes, if we are to take on the Heike, we will need his support. And to get that, it seems I will first have to deal with my reckless cousin." His wife Masako now has a look of concern. "But remember your pledge, Yoritomo. We swore to protect Kiso's son here. Our daughter and Yoshitaka may still be young, but Ohime adores him, and they are engaged to be married one day. If something happens to Kiso, if he dies under your orders, well, what will become of our future son-in-law? He will see you as responsible for his father's death. Will you let him live? If not, our daughter will be distraught. She will never forgive you. Promise me that will not happen." Yoritomo turns to his wife. "I will not do anything that will harm Ohime, I promise you, Masako." For several seconds, husband and wife look each other in the eye. Then Masako nods, rises, and leaves the hall. Yoritomo takes a deep sigh, then looks at his brother. "Come with me, Kuro. I want to show you something." The two brothers walk out into the crisp morning sunlight. Yoritomo says, "I'm going to send a large force of horsemen to the capital, Kuro, and I want you to lead them." Yoshitsune is shocked, but he can't contain his excitement. "Well, I am honored, brother, but I thought you might appoint Kajiwara. He will be your lieutenant, Kuro." Well, he will not like that. He always treats me as though I am a child." "Ha!" Yoritomo slaps his brother on the back. "Well, you are a child, Kuro, but a child with a brilliant mind and a great future before you. But first, you will have to prove yourself, and then Kajiwara will respect you." "But do you trust him, Kajiwara?" "Yes," says Yoritomo. "After Ishibashi, he saved my life. He fought for the Heike in those days, but after the battle, when I was escaping in the mountains, he discovered my hiding place, but he refused to give me up to the Heike." "Yes," says Yoshitsune. "So I have heard. That may be true, but the fact he once switched sides doesn't mean he couldn't do that again." Yoritomo smiles at his brother and says nothing. They now arrive at the stables, and the air is filled with the smell of the horses. "Have you met my prized ones, Kuro? Let me show you. They will be useful if you are in battle. The question is, which of your warriors will be worthy enough to ride them?" There are a line of horses, and separated from the others is a tall, muscular stallion, dark chestnut in color, and with a glittering, gilt-edged saddle. This is Ikezuki. He has something of a temperament and may bite any horse or man who comes near him, and that's why we call him Pound of Flesh, because that's what he'll take from you. Some of my men believe he is a messenger from the god of war, Hachiman. I am planning to give him to Kajiwara's son, Kagesue. "Oh," says Yoshitsune. "Well, why him? There must be other samurai who are better riders." Who do you suggest?" "Maybe one of the Sasaki brothers? Takatsuno is the fastest rider. He served you well at Ishibashi, I have heard." He did indeed. Without the Sasaki brothers, we would not have won our first victory. You know, it was Takatsuno who fired the first arrow in that attack. The arrow that started the war, it is said. The Sasakis are the most competitive men I have known, and Takatsuno is the most impetuous of them all. He always has to be the first. But a brave young man and a fine warrior. "All right, I will give Ikezuki to Takatsuna, and I will give to Kajiwara's son this fine steed instead, Surusumi. Yoritomo reaches up to another huge warhorse, as black as ground ink. As he strokes the dark horse's neck, he thinks back to a moment more than 20 years ago, when as a teenage boy he rode with his father and a small group of Genji warriors, galloping through the mountains to the east of the capital, fleeing from the Heike warriors after the Heiji rebellion. Our father owned a horse like this one, Kuro. He was riding it the last night I saw him. Yoshitsune asks, what was he like, our father? Ah, of course you have no memory. He was the bravest man I ever knew, and the most loyal. But he made an error of judgment that led to his downfall. He trusted Go Shirakawa, and the emperor sold him out to the Heike. I do not intend to make the same mistake. Yoritomo turns to Yoshitsune and looks him in the eye. Beware of Go Shirakawa, Koro. The old emperor will seduce you with promises and titles, and then he will betray you. I am not my father, and I do not trust people easily, but I know I can at least trust you. At this point, the brothers realize this is the closest they have ever had to having a strong brotherly bond, something they have both lacked for their entire lives. But what neither brother can know is that from this moment on, their lives will take very different paths. For one of them will rise to become leader of the nation, while the other will go on to become a legend. What they also cannot know is that this is the last time they will ever see each other. Yoritomo passes to his brother the reins of the horse Ikezuki. Here, Kuro, try handling him. Yoshitsune nervously approaches the towering horse, who rears up and starts struggling. As he reaches out, the horse bites his arm and Yoshitsune flinches and pulls back. But then he gradually starts to gain the horse's trust, and soon has him under control. Ah, there you go, says Yoshitsune. Not too difficult. Yoritomo claps in admiration. Ha, I hope you are as good at taming Kiso. Says Yoshitsune. I suspect our cousin will want more than a pound of flesh in return for being tamed. Suddenly, Yoshitsune becomes serious and looks at Yoritomo. What should I do, brother, if Kiso will not be tamed? You promised the Lady Masako that Kiso will not be harmed, but... Yoritomo looks thoughtful as he strokes the neck of Surusumi. I promised to do anything I could to protect our daughter. So, Yoshitsune persists, what should I do if cousin Kiso refuses to negotiate, if he cannot be reasoned with? Without turning to his brother, Yoritomo looks up into the horse's eyes and says, kill him. For the second time in just 4 years, two armies face each other across the Uji River south of the nation's capital. To the north are lined the forces of Kiso Yoshinaka. For weeks, Kiso, still stationed in his headquarters in the capital, has rebuffed any attempt at negotiation and has refused to deal with either the retired emperor or envoys sent from Yoritomo. Now he has sent 500 men to defend the main bridge at Uji, where they have ripped up the planks to prevent a bridge attack. For good measure, he has also placed stakes at the bottom of the river at known crossing points and tied ropes between them to ward off any attempted river crossing. On the southern side of the river, by the great Phoenix Hall known as Byodo Inn, stands Yoritomo's army under the young commander Yoshitsune, leading his first battle. As Yoshitsune gazes across the river, his lieutenant Kajiwara Kagetoki, a tall, gruff man with a constantly sour expression, comes up and asks, Sir, are you going to speak to your men, my lord? Give them some inspiration? Yoshitsune fires a quick glance at Kajiwara and then calls his men. More than 3 years ago, he declares, two armies faced each other across this same river. My uncle, Yorimasa, fought bravely on that day with the son of Emperor Go Shirakawa and the monks of Midera, but in the end they were defeated by the Heike. The reason they lost was because they failed to cross the river and they did not take the battle to the enemy. Today, we will not make the same mistake. Today, we do not face the Heike, instead we face a more immediate threat. My cousin, Kiso Yoshinaka, has betrayed the emperor, burned down the imperial palace, and has even offered a truce with the Heike. He has refused any attempt to negotiate. He is a traitor, and today, on the orders of the retired emperor Go Shirakawa,
he must be defeated. Now we know that Kiso has laid traps for us. The crossing will not be easy. So I ask you, who among you is brave enough to face the turbulent waters? Who will be first to cross the river?" Immediately, 2 riders approach, one on a chestnut horse, the other on a horse that is jet black. The first rider announces himself, "I am Sasaki Takatsuna, and I will be the..." But before he can finish, the men start cheering as they see that the other rider, the warrior Kajiwara Kagesue, has plunged into the river and is already several meters across. Takatsuna turns his horse, Ikezuki, and charges into the river in pursuit of his rival. Kajiwara smiles as he watches the race begin. "It appears, my lord, that my son will be first across the river." Yoshitsune looks at his lieutenant and says, "Don't be too hasty, Kajiwara. The race is not over yet. I'll wager that Takatsuna will take the prize." Kajiwara raises his eyebrows. "Very well, my lord. I accept your wager." By now, the 2 riders are about a third of the way across the river, and the waters are already up to their saddles. Kagesue is still several lengths ahead when Takatsuna shouts, "Hey, Kagesue! Your saddle looks loose. Watch out, you'd better tighten it." Momentarily distracted, Kagesue rises in his stirrup and attempts to tighten his saddle. Meanwhile, Takatsuna grabs the opportunity and drives Ikezuki on, leaving his rival in his wake. Realizing he's been tricked, Kagesue urges his horse Surusumi on. The 2 riders are now approaching the halfway mark, and from the riverbank behind them, they hear comrades shouting a warning, "Watch out for the hidden ropes!" Takatsuna takes out his sword, raises it behind him, and then sweeps the blade underwater. The tip of the sword slices through the rope that Kiso's men had left between 2 stakes in the riverbed, allowing the 2 riders a path through. He raises his sword aloft again, and there is a cheer from the Genji on the riverbank. Eventually reaching the far bank, Takatsuna urges his horse onto dry land and scrambles up the slope, Kagesue following closely behind. Takatsuna rises in his stirrups again and in a great voice declares, "I am Sasaki Shiro Takatsuna, descendant of Emperor Uda 9 generations in the past, and I am the first man across the Uji River." Another cheer erupts as 500 more horsemen plunge into the river amidst a volley of arrows released by Kiso's army. Taken by surprise, as they were still expecting Yoshitsune to attempt a bridge crossing, Kiso's men rush to counter the oncoming horsemen. They hold the riverbank for a while, but Yoshitsune's horsemen, once all across, cut them to pieces and send them fleeing back north towards the capital. Yoshitsune, as he arrives on the opposite bank, knows he has achieved an historic victory. His lieutenant, Kajiwara, comes up to him. "Congratulations, my lord," he says, but Yoshitsune notices there is a dryness to Kajiwara's words, and the lieutenant does not smile. News quickly reaches the capital, where Kiso is counting his losses. Having lost a significant portion of his men at Uji, he realizes he now has few options. He had considered capturing the retired emperor and fleeing westward to join the Heike, but news arrives that Yoshitsune's men have already surrounded the emperor's residence. There is now little option. He decides to make for the east, with just a few hundred men and his loyal comrade and lover, Tomoe Gozen. At the banks of the river Kamo in the capital, modern-day Kyoto, they come up against the advance guard of Yoshitsune's army galloping north from Uji. Kiso fights with all the fury of a man who knows this day may be his last, but Yoshitsune's men just keep coming on, each man eager to take Kiso's head and achieve everlasting fame. With a great cry, Kiso charges into a force of several thousand men. Time and again he seems sure to be killed, but he always breaks through. Tomoe Gozen at his side, carrying a great sword and a mighty bow, her long hair streaming behind her as she urges her horse on, refusing to give up. "We must find Kanehira," Kiso shouts to her, and together they head up the Kamo River as Yoshitsune's samurai speed after them. Again and again they whirl to face them, half a dozen times, their tiny band of horsemen repulsing a foe as overwhelming as clouds or mist. Kiso has faced a larger force many times in the past, but never have the odds been stacked against him as today. For now, Kiso is losing men every minute. At the town of Otsu, on the banks of Lake Biwa, Kiso finally sees a familiar figure, his lieutenant and foster brother, Imai Kanehira. After facing a division of Yoshitsune's army at Seta Bridge, Kanehira has seen his 800 men dwindle to just 300. When the 2 childhood friends finally meet each other, Kiso takes Kanehira's hands. "It seemed all over for me, Kanehira, but I wouldn't let them take me. I had to find out what happened to you. And likewise, my friend, the bond between us still holds. Remember, as boys, we played with bamboo horses. We swore that should we ever face death, the 2 of us would die together." "Yes, I remember. We may not have many men, but we can at least fight our last battle. How many of Yoshitsune's men are on that hill, do you say? I'd say 6,000 horse. A fine opponent then. If I'm going to die anyway, I might as well be cut down among a superior force. And so Lord Kiso Yoshinaka, victor of the Battle of Kurikawa Pass, rises in his saddle and drives his horse towards the enemy. You will have long heard tell of me, he declares, the man from Kiso. Now, with your eyes, behold the man famed as the Asahi Shogun, Minamoto no Yoshinaka. If you are worthy, come and take my head now and show it off to Yoritomo. With that, he charges at the 6,000, with Tomoe and Kanehira at his side, slashing left, right, up, down, everywhere, striking terror among the horsemen that oppose him. But the challenge is too great, and eventually, once again, he finds he has just 5 riders left. One of these is Tomoe. Kiso turns to her and says, Go, woman, go quickly, anywhere, far away. I will die in battle, or if wounded, I'll take my own life, but I will not have you die with me. You must survive. But still she does not leave him, refusing to give up their embrace. I too will have a worthy opponent, so you can see how fine a death I can die. At that moment, a man from Musashi known as Onda Moroshige, a valiant warrior famed for his strength, approaches with 30 men. When she sees him, Tomoe charges, catches him in an iron grip, forces his head down onto the pommel of a saddle, keeps it pinned there for a few seconds, then twists his head around, cuts it off with her sword and tosses it away. The last Kiso sees of his lover is as she rides into a field of horsemen, charging eastward. Now, Kiso and Kanehira are alone. Kiso sighs, this armor of mine, Kanehira. I never gave it much thought before, but it feels heavy today. There is still life in you, my friend, and your horse is not yet winded. Our men have gone, and there is only one of me, I know, but think of me as 1,000. I have 7 or 8 arrows left. I will cover you for a while. Make for that wood over there. I'll hold them off long enough if you choose to take your own life before they snatch it from you. I should have faced my fate in the capital itself, says Kiso, but at least I can die here, today, with you. With that, Kiso heads for the pine wood, while Kanehira turns his horse and charges at the oncoming forces. Rising in his stirrups, he declares, You will have heard of me, too, from long ago. Now see me for real. I am before you, Imai no Shiro Kanehira, foster brother of Lord Kiso in my 33rd year. Yoritomo will know of me too, so kill me if you can and show him my head. Kanehira releases his final 8 arrows in rapid succession with devastating accuracy, and 8 horsemen fall dead. Then he draws his sword and attacks, his armor deflecting the arrows that rain upon him. Meanwhile, Lord Kiso has almost reached the pine wood when suddenly his horse plunges through a thin layer of ice that covers a muddy rice field. As the horse panics, it sinks further and further into the mud, right up to its neck, and Kiso is powerless to drive it on. Realizing his time is up, he looks up once more towards the east where he last saw Tomoe, and as he does so, his tilted helmet offers an opening. An oncoming horseman sees his chance, draws his bow to the full, and an arrow plunges into Kiso's forehead. Kiso slumps forward into his horse's neck. The approaching warrior takes his head, impales it on his sword, holds it aloft, and shouts, The famous Lord Kiso has fallen to Ishida no Jiro Tamahisa. Meanwhile, Imai Kanehira, still fighting, hears the man's voice and says, Well, I have no one left to protect. Watch me now, gentlemen from the east. Learn from the greatest brave in Japan how a warrior ends his life. With that, Kanehira takes the point of his sword in his mouth. Clenching it between his teeth, he stands in his stirrups and throws himself headlong from his horse. He falls head first onto the ground, the sword slices through his brain and exits from the back of his head, killing him instantly. The Battle of Awazu is over. The conflict between the 2 cousins, Yoshinaka and Yoshitsune, has generated perhaps more legends than any other encounter in the Genpei War. The race to be first across the river became a popular tale for plays and stories over the centuries. Kiso's final stand with Tomoe Gozen has been retold many times, and Imai Kanehira's leap from his horse with a sword in his mouth is one of the most spectacular acts of self-sacrifice in samurai history. As to what happened to Tomoe Gozen after the Battle of Awazu, no one knows for sure. She appears no more in the tale of the Heike, and we don't know if she died on that day or survived. But legends have grown up over the years. Some say she was taken in custody back to Kamakura, others that she lived the rest of her life as a nun in the north, eventually dying at the age of 91, and so passed away Japan's most celebrated female samurai. In a small temple near Lake Biwa called Gichuji, you can still see the tomb where Kiso's remains, except for his head, are believed to be buried. Next to it is a memorial to Tomoe Gozen. The Edo-era poet and traveller Basho, perhaps Japan's most famous writer, so admired the story of Kiso Yoshinaka that he wanted to be buried next to him. And so it is that at this tiny temple you can see the three of them in a row, Tomoe, Kiso and Basho, with just a small pond and a garden for company. The brief but dramatic story of Kiso Yoshinaka and Tomoe Gozen has come to an end. Although for a while Kiso had been appointed Asahi Shogun, he never achieved control over the capital, let alone the nation, so he cannot truly claim to be the nation's first shogun. That position is still to be claimed. For now though, it is Yoshitsune, who until now has been more of a side character in our story, comes to the fore, and starts to eclipse even his illustrious half-brother Yoritomo. For it is Yoshitsune who now rides into the capital in triumph, and it is there that he will have his first meeting with the sinister retired emperor Go Shirakawa, the spider at the center of the imperial web. This is the start of a momentous few days, for very soon we will witness the first events that turn Yoshitsune from a warrior to a legend. In the next episode, Yoshitsune faces the Heike for the first time with one of the turning points of the Genpei War, the Great Battle of Ichi no Tani.